Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi Brachas in the Ois V'Hadar edition, Daf Zayin. We left off on Daf Vav Amid Beis, Mamish, the last few lines on the bottom line, Umeh Hoya David Oisa. We are going to be learning more about David HaMelech's waking up every morning. We had a similar sugya in the Bavli, and we're going to go back to the Machlokes that we learned yesterday. Machlokes Tanoim between Rabbi Nosson and Rabbi, regarding how many watches, how many mishmaris do we have both by day and by the night. Rabbi Nossi holds 3 and Rabbi holds 4. All of that will be needed to understand or to apply the Shita of Rabbi Eliezer, who says that you can only read the Shema at night. To know Pashit, is it 3 hours into the night? Is it 4 hours into the night? And then we're going to have a discussion that will be predicated on us reviewing various discussions that we had in Bavli. And the most important one is that we had an opinion, and we know that's the opinion of Rabbi Shua ben Levi, that tfilos be'emtza tiknu, which means midoi raisa, and we're going with that midoi raisa. Shema has to be recited both in the morning and at night. Now in the morning, in everyone's opinion, Shema is recited first, and then we recite the Shemona Esrei. And like we spoke out the Machlokes Rambam and Ramban, the Ramban holds tefillah is midrabana. Even if we're going to go with the Rambam, that tefillah is doiraisa, but the nusach tefillah and the zman tefillah is midrabana. And on top of that, the Chazal enacted Birchas Kriya Shema. And on top of that, they have the concept of being soimich gula tefillah. So in the morning, l'kula alma, it's the blessings of the Shema, the blessing after the Shema that concludes with the words Goal Yisrael, and then we go straight into the Shemona Esrei. Question is, what's the Seder of the night? So we, at night, like in the morning, we say the Shema, and then we say Shemona Esrei by Maidiv. But we're going to have a sugya in our Gemara that's going to be based on an opinion that we learned in the Bavli, and that's called Tfilos Be'emtza Tiknu, that the Shemona Esreis are in middle of the Shema. So Shema, Shemona Esrei Shachris, but at night, it's Shemona Esrei Arvis, and the last thing you do is you say the Shema. And based on that, we're going to have a question whether, and that will be the Shita of Rabbi Yasa, that Oimer Devarim Achar Emes V'Yatziv. At night, they used to say Emes V'Yatziv and not Ve'emuna. So one opinion holds that Shema, which is the last thing you say after the might of Shemona Esrei, after you daven, you say the Shema. You can learn Torah, you can say Tehillim, and then you have the opinion of Rav Huna and others that Ein Omer Devarim Achar Emes V'Yatziv. In other words, based on the Seder that it's Shemona Esrei of Maidav and then Shema has to be recited mamish up until when you go to sleep. And we'll see stories in the Gemara where there were certain Amirayim that they would say the Shema first with the brachas at night after Shemona Esrei, and then if they didn't fall asleep, they kept on repeating the Shema, because they held that nothing may be said after Emes V'Yatziv. And that really will go into another whole discussion that we're not going to go into later. We'll just mention it now, the whole concept of Hamapel. That the fact that we are able to say Hamapel by Krishma Shalamita after we say the Shema is only based on the sheet of Rabbi Yasa, that Omer Devarim Achar Emes V'Yatziv, as we'll see, the concept of Shema in the bed, and it helps, protects from Mazikin. And perhaps it only offers you that protection if you say nothing after the Shema.
We say Ve'emuna.
I know that. But we also learned over there in Brachas. We say Emes Ve'emuna. But in many, including today's daf, will go on the Emes V'Yatziv is said both by day and by night. So again, we're concluding the end of Daf Vav. We are learning about how David HaMelech, unlike other kings, that noch got up a few hours into the day. And David HaMelech says a few times in Tehillim that Ira Shachar, right, that he puts his glory and honor to the side, and he's the one that gives God the glory. When we say that Alois HaShachar, so to say, is the awakening of God. So to say, we are up before God. Turning to Dav Zayin, Dav Pinchas b'Shem Rabbi Elazar b'Rabbi Nachem says that that before David HaMelech would go to sleep, he would place the navel. There's a whole machlokes exactly what type of string instrument is the navel. But it's not one type of string instrument. The kinnor is the harp. And he would put it by his head. Okay, so Zaina Salter. That doesn't help me. You have to look at 18 pictures over there online, what a navel is. It's a string instrument. It's similar to a violin. And he would arise at midnight. This first version, don't jump. I know that we learned in Brachas over there in Bavli different. The Gemara is going to bring it here. He would wake up. He would begin to play musical instruments. Why? So the other Torah scholars should also hear middle of the night. And what would they say? They would be inspired to wake up and learn. Why would they be inspired? Because they would say, so Anu Alachas Kamo V'Kamo. Melech also had the monarchy responsibilities. That's why he learned at night, because in the day he needed to attend to the affairs of the Medina. So what did he do? He made up extra effort to learn at night. So we who have less responsibilities have a clearer head and a freer mind to learn Torah. So he would play it to inspire them to learn. Now the Gemara says, no, it wasn't that way. He would have a kinnor. It was a harp. And it would be hanging near an open window. And a northern wind would blow at night. And this is already something that happens beneath. This was a miracle. And it would play by itself. And when did it happen? It happened exactly at midnight, which is quite amazing. Okay. In other words, they would awaken him at night. So as a nes. Now the nes is connected to David, but the nes happened through that kinoi. So hadohu dechsiv. Now you know the meaning of a pasuk that we have in Malachim concerning Elisha. B'chlal, there's a klal that what? That a prophet can only be inspired with the ruach of prophecy mitoich simcha. Not everyone is always b'simcha. They can say I'm happy. They can say it 1 billion times. It's not going to help them. Ken Zogan, words are fake. Check it. They can think I'm happy, but they're not. They have to really be happy. One of the things that inspires simcha is music. Not what they call today music, real music. So Elisha, there was a time that he needed to be inspired with prophecy. So what did he do? So Sheshtei, that Vahoya kinagain hamenagin, that it was as the instrument played, he felt the joy and he was inspired with Ruach HaKodesh. So says the Gemara, says Rabbi Levi, kinagain bamenagin. If we would be speaking about someone that's actively playing a musical instrument, the right expression should have been kinagain bamenagin. It was when he played the instrument shteitnish ein sivkan. What does it say? Kinagain hamenagin, as the instrument played. That was the same kinnor that happened with David. I mean, he merited that same type of ness. Hakinnor hoyem and nagid me'elo. Ruach HaKodesh and Nevuah. Yes. You have to find. What do you mean? That. Okay, let me say it like this: that kas, the opposite side, if a person, God forbid, would want to be imbued with the spirit of real impurity and darkness, one of the ways that they would get inspired would be by aroused midas hakas, and not only would they get angry, but they would break something in their anger. That was one of the steps that the machashvam would do, which is why we're never allowed to do that. Very good point. So it's zelu umazeh. Let's go back. Now, let's go back. We had a machlokes Rabbi and Amnos, right? Each one had a raya. So now that the Gemara explained how Rab Nosson can, let's go. Now that we explained how Rab Nosson resolves the Rebbe's raya, right? Rab Nosson holds, my friends, that what? Rab Nosson holds that there are three. There are three. And David HaMelech says that I get up prior to 2 watches, but he gets up at midnight. So the shot will be that sometimes they got up at midnight, and a chanami got up at midnight if he fabreng with the chevra, if he had a late fabreng at night. But if he was by himself, it was only with the family, he went to sleep earlier. And there he would get up prior to midnight. He would get up prior. That was his answer. Now let's go in the other direction. Mama came in every time he did Amnas. Says over there, it says that Gideon came to attack the enemy, and he came at the time where the enemy was sleeping. That had the least amount of protection. When did he come? He came Rosh HaShmoires HaTichonim. He came in the middle, at the head of the middle watch. Now, doesn't that imply that that there's only one in the middle? There's only three. The only one, because if there would be four, then there's middle watches. Oh, so Amar Afuna, one way to resolve it is Enachanami. Listen, there are four watches, but if you come, he came at midnight. Why does the verse call it the head of the middle? Because the head doesn't necessarily only mean the head. The head can be the head or the end, the edge. So there is a point which is side the end of the second and the beginning of the third. Soif shel shniya v'rosh shel shlishis. Hey misach misav chois halayla. They divide the middle of the night. That's mamash midnight. That's when he came. Four watches, but he came in the middle of the second, the middle of the third. Amar Rav Mana, I don't like that answer because you still. The problem is, I get it that the rosh can be in the middle point, but miksiv tichoy nois is the lashon rabbi, right? Watches doesn't say that. It says tichoy no, the middle watch. Middle watch. Now, no one says there's five. See, if there would be five, there would again be a middle. Four doesn't have a middle. There is no watch that's in the middle. If there's four, so answers Rav Mana, he didn't just reject Rav Huna, but he came with his own answer, said something about it. Why did Gideon come at that time? Because when he came to attack the enemy, he wanted to make sure that the enemy is least ready. So he says like this, that the first Ashmoira, everyone is up on the first Ashmoira. The point is that when people began to go to sleep, he didn't go when people began to go to sleep. He didn't come at the end of the night where you have certain people after they entered old age. You're looking at one, they wake up early. The best time where most people are asleep is in the beginning of the middle. What's that middle? The first one we're not counting because everyone is up. Not everyone. Some people go to sleep on the first Ashmoira. Gideon thought that way. So it's interesting. That Kadmaisa loy mischashva. The first one we're not counting. Why are we not counting it? Because the context of him coming to attack the enemy when they're sleeping is the ad kidoin until the end of the first watch is biriyasa Eden. The berio is the mention. You can say the healthy people are still awake, not the alter people, which are the soldiers, the healthy people. So since we're not counting the first, there's four. The first doesn't count. It's stuck at the other three. Okay. Get ended. Now, here we have the word piska. You know, in the Bible, you just have two dots. And you quote the words of the Mishnah. We have to get used to it. So piska means we're quoting a section. What's the section? We covered the Rabbi Eliezer. We covered the Machlokes Rebbe and Amnas and Pashut Shat. What's the end of the first watch? Machlokes. And now the second opinion is that what? That Shema could be recited until midnight, says the Gemara. Now here we go, guys. Fasten your seatbelts. I know it's few lines, which is good because we don't have to rush. Rabbi Yasa v'shem Rabbi Yechanan. Halacha kechachamim. We're beginning to quote Rabbi Yasa. Now, just to point out that in Brachas Bavli, that Chesamid Beis, the Gemara says Halacha ke Rabbi Gamliel. Just to point out one thing. Stop. There's a machlokes between the Yerushalmi and the Bavli, which is not the end of the world. This fits a lot better because we follow the Rabbi. Halachic Chachamim means the way when we learned the Mishnah that lechatchila you should say the Shema until midnight. Because when we learned the Mishnah, when the children of Rabbi Gamliel asked their father, "What should we do?" We had an oinus. We didn't say it. They knew what their father held. They also knew that Yachid v'Rabba Malachi Kerabba. They knew that Rabbi Gamliel himself will follow the Chachamim. The ending of the Mishnah is afilu lechachamim b'diavad. Since really you can say it midyarais until alois hashachar, you should say it until chatzos. Lahar chikadem in aveda, but you can do it. Allah chacham. Now, another klal. When you have an Amoyra, Rabbi Yasa, who's quoting Rabbi Yechanan, you don't always know whether he himself holds that way or whether he's just sharing with the Chevra that Rabbi Yochanan holds. Now we're going to want to know, what does Rabbi Yasa hold? So says the Gemara that Rabbi Yasa mefaked lechavraya. Rabbi Yasa told the Chevra, the yeshiva bachrim, that in be'esun misaske ba'iraisa. Get used to the words over here. If you want to learn Torah during the night, and these people went to sleep after midnight, they learned far into the night, what should you do? Atun Chariya Shema, you should recite the Shema, Koidem Chatzois, recite it before Shema, because what did we just say, Chevra? We paskin like Rabbi Yochanan, and it's not only Rabbi Yasa b'Shem Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Yasa also adopted that, you're paskin like the Chachamim. So if you want to learn Torah until 2 in the morning, Shmuley is smiling because you just did it last night, it didn't help him wake up early. So make sure, recite the Shema before midnight, and then keep on learning. Umasaskin. Okay, so now the Gemara says that Milsei Omra Shahalacha Kechachamim. From Milsei, from his statement, we see that he also agrees that the halacha is like the Chachamim. At Khan, it's easy, right? You don't need more information. Now, before we read the next statement, let us read the Pnei Moshe. I know normally we go back to Charedim, Pnei Moshe. We're going to read the Pnei Moshe. They both say the same thing. The Pnei Moshe adds another nuance, which becomes obvious, but we're not people that get the obvious. Let's read it inside. You get it? Milsei Amar is like a middle of the Amid and the Pnei Moshe. Says the Gemara, V'shma mina oid mi milsei. The Gemara is now going to learn by inference something else. The Sfira Lei that he holds, Sha'omer Devarim, these are the words. That Omer Devarim, that one is allowed to say other words after Emes V'Yatziv. And people say, what are we talking about? He's talking about night. Yeah, like we said in our intro, that our Gemara is following the opinion that at night, the blessing after the Shema also begins with Emes V'Yatziv. We don't do it that way. They did it that way. Let's read it inside. That V'hainu Emes V'Emuna. We're speaking about at night. The question is, another thing, guys, whenever you say the Shema Midrabanan has to be recited with brachas. And the birchos Kriya Shema aren't only brachas before, it's brachas afterwards. So whenever they said the Shema, they would say it with the birchos of Kriya Shema. And as we spoke in our intro, our Gemara is following the opinion that tfilos be'emtza tiknun, Shmona Esreis, both, all of them, Shachris Mincha and Maidiv, are in middle of the Shema. The morning Shema said before Shachris Shmona Esrei, and the whole Maidiv was different. Maidiv was Shmona Esrei, and then Shema Bibir Choiseh, that was the last thing that you said. That's what you just clarified. So the last thing you davened was Shema and Emes V'Yatziv. Emes V'Emuna for us. The question is, after you finish that, what do you need to do? Now, in the morning, what are you talking about? In the morning, this whole concept of being soymech geula l'tfila. This Gemara is following the opinion that smichas geula l'tfila is only shaykh for the morning. So in the morning, nothing can be said after the Shema, prior to Shemona Esrei. At night, anyways, you're not davening Shemona Esrei after the Shema. Shema is at the end. And Shema doesn't only mean the Shema. Shema means Shema Birchoisel, Emes V'Yatziv, Emes V'Yatziv there. Can you say anything afterwards? Or not a word? You know, we have that today with the Hamap, Zagnish Konvart. We're going to learn, like we mentioned in the intro, that according to the Shittas, we'll learn right now that Ein Omer Devarim, Achar Emes V'Yatziv, not even Hamap, not even Torah, not even Tehillim, the last thing is Shema. But he doesn't hold that way. And calls us kid them mashma lakam, and it's going to become evident from what we're going to learn soon on Amid Beis, etc., etc. In other words, ukoloymer dal karchach to sfira lei shoymrim psukam achar birchos kriyish mashalavers kodem atfila ve'ein choyshishin lismech golol tefila b'kishmashal arves. Why our Gemara must be following, guys? This is the last narrow line in the Pnei Moshe. Bishum that tefila is be'emtza tiknon. Very important. In other words, let me go even more. I'm just going to say by heart. The whole ideal of reading Shema after Shemona Esrei is to give us the advantage of reading Shema right before you go to sleep. And we're going to learn this on Amud Beis. That has to do with getting rid of the mazik. So the question is, he told his Talmidim, we pass like the Chachamim. Shema, say Shema before Chatzos. Let me add another layer. What did we learn just a few daf ago here in Yerushalmi? That it was common for them to daven Ma'ariv and it was still day. B'chlal didn't daven Ma'ariv at night. They daven Ma'ariv during the end of the day. And more than that, what did we also learn? The way the Yerushalmi learned that, you know how they would daven Ma'ariv then? They would daven Shema and Shemona Esrei. And the Gemara asked, the Shema that they said before Shemona Esrei was not to fulfill the mitzvah of saying the Shema because they daven during the day before it says. The Gemara asked, so why do they say the Shema? Not to daven Shemona Esrei stam, Devar Torah Shemona Esrei. And we learned in the Charedim, just like by Mincha. What do? Ashrei, Shemona Esrei. You don't begin Shemona Esrei. Ashrei. So might have there was just Shema, Chatzi Kaddish, Shemona Esrei. That Shema was only to say Shema mitoich Devar Torah, according to the words that we had before. And now you have a mitzvah to say the Shema. That was said afterwards. So says Rabbi Yasser, say it before midnight. But he was telling it to Talmidim that are learning Torah way after midnight, which means it didn't bother him that after they said the Shema, that they would later say other words. Now, the other words are words of Torah, but if you can say words of Torah, you can say words of Tehillim. If you can say words of Torah and Tehillim in this context, you can have a shmuz also. That's now let's read it inside. Mil say another thing infer that you are allowed to say words after the night might. Gavalik. It's Gavalik because we're so fixed in the way we do things. It's much good to live a day to see how other things were done differently.
Who's the other opinion?
What was that?
Who's the other opinion that says that you can't talk?
This opinion that tefillas be'emtza tiknon, you have to correct me. I'm not certain. I think it's Rabbi Shua ben Leib. It's a minority opinion, but our Gemara is following. In other words, you have to understand something. That if Shema is said the way we say it, this whole conversation, what are you talking about? After Shema, after emes v'yatziv, you have to say Shemona Esrei. And enough, we have that whole sugya. How can we even say Hashkivenu? Why isn't that a hefsek? We have that question. Because we hold that the concept of being soimer ku'ulul tefillah isn't only in the day, it's also by night. But based on the shita, that's the Pnei Moshe, that tefillas be'emtza tiknun. Well, if you're saying birchos kriya shema at night, after you said Shemona Esrei, is avade that the whole concept of smichus gula tefillah is only in the morning. So that's not the issue. The issue is afterwards, can you learn? Can you daven? Can you say tehillim? Or no, after Shema at night, go to sleep. Machloides. So Rabbi Yasser holds that you can say other words. Honey, we learned in the Braisa. If you reach Shema the Beis HaKnesses, Ba'shachar, in the morning, Yatsi Yedei Chavas. Now, guys, look inside the last line of the Charedim. Look inside before you turn the Amid. Afal Pisha Ein Magdimin Kivosikin. What's the Chiddush? Really, ideally, you're supposed to say Shema in the morning, right before the Nates, in order to daven the Shemona Esrei by Nates. And by morning, everyone holds of the importance of being soimech ge'ula l'tefillah. Ge'ula meaning the bracha after Shema is the bracha of ge'ula. So really, even though ideally you should daven vosikin, nevertheless, says the Braisa, if you daven in a minyan where they don't daven vosikin, you're yoitza. Obviously, Shema needed to be recited within the zman of Kriya Shema. But in the morning, bebeis haknesses, that's normal. Not everyone, vosikin were the special people. Most people daven whenever at work. They go to work like us. Daven whenever at 7 o'clock in the morning. Oh, so you yoitze, aber dav zayin omid beis. But ba'erev, when you daven Shema, when you say the Shema in the beis haknesses at night, you're not yoitze yedei chavasoi. You're not yoitze yedei chavasoi, and you have to understand something. Even though we just quoted, it was Tav Gimel, that they used to say the Shema in shul prior to night, but it doesn't mean that they never daven night of late. If the meaning of the Braisa would be be'erev lo yatsi yedei chavasi, only because it was normally said during the day, then the Braisa should not have used the word beis haknesses. It's not about where you're saying it. It's because you're saying it koydem zman kriya shema. The fact that the Braisa doesn't mention the zman, it mentions the location, is mashma that even if you were to recite the Shema beis haknesses after it says, you still will not be yoitz. That's the next line. That's the next line. That's the kasha. Can't tell me it's this man, even though again normally they would daven koydem asman, but then don't mention Beis HaKnesses. So here we go. Rav Huna will be the dissenting opinion against Rabbi Yasser. Rav Huna b'shem Rabbi Yosef. Ma tam amru adam tzarich likrei shema bebeis be'erev b'shvil lahavriach as hamazikin. In other words, aside of the biblical obligation of reciting the Shema at night, aside of that, there is an inyan that we call Kriya Shema Sha'alamit. While a person is awake, the neshama is in the person, at least the lower level, nefesh ruach and neshama is in the person, that this allows darkness, unholy spirits, we're going to call them mazikin, to go into the person because the light takes away the darkness. And since when a person goes to sleep, that's what sleep is. It's echad mishisha nemisa. There's a certain detachment of the neshama from the guf. So a vessel is never empty. Either it's filled, the haboy reik ein by mayim, right? So right, Chazal say haboy reik. Of course, if haboy reik ein by mayim, it's empty. Mayim ein boy, in the chashem akravim yesh boy. Because the boy is always going to be filled with something. When the neshama is in it, the nechashim and the akravim won't be in there. When the neshama leaves, there's the potential for the vessel, for us, to be filled with negative forces. And what protects us from that is saying Shema right before you go to sleep. And when and our Gemara's understanding of right before you go to sleep is dafka right before you go to sleep. In other words, milsei amra, we get the milsei amra from his words. In other words, from Rav Huna's statement in his interpretation of the Braisa, we infer she'ein oimer dvarim achar emes v'yatziv. Again, emes v'yatziv means maitiv. Also following that Shema said after Shema Esrei. They said Shema before Shema Esrei. That it had nothing to do with Shema. Dvar Torah. You know, we learned also on brachas that there were times that they would say Daseres Hadibras. Then no, we say certain psukim before we daven Shema Esrei. But the Shema at night is dafke alamita, and at kedei kach that nothing should be said after the Shema. So that's the machlokes we're having today. And now that we brought down this machlokes, we want to now gather other stories from where we can infer about other Amoraim. Do they follow Rabbi Yasa or do they follow Rav Huna? Milsei, you have to get used to these lashonis. Milsei that Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani Amra Kain. Milsei from his words or from an incident. Here it's from a story. We also see that Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani holds like Rav Huna and not like Rabbi Yasa, who held say the Shema in the Beis Medrash and the Zal and keep on learning afterwards. They would not agree with that. Rav Shmuel bar Nachmani kad hava nachis liibura. When he went down in order to get involved in deciding if the year should be a leap year. Now, normally the word going down normally is in reference to leaving the Holy Land and going to Chutz La'aretz. That is difficult when it comes to the Ibur Shana because the rule is that you're only Ma'aber Shana Ba'aretz, even though we also learned that Rabbi Akiva, when you leave Eretz Yisrael and there's no one as great as you, you have the right to decide regarding the Ibur Shana Chutz La'aretz. So either that was the case, or Pashut, he lived on a tall mountain and he went down to get involved in Ibur Shana. Really, just a maybe. Just a thought came to my mind that we spoke out at Rebbe's Vart, that how is it, how do we explain, how can there even be a machlokes between Shmuel and Rav Adam when it comes to the movements of the sun? How can there be a machlokes in Metzias? And V'oid, we know that the actual Metzias doesn't always align with what the Torah says. So the Nakud of the Rebbe is that, you know, there are many worlds, and a lower world reflects the higher world. But if there is an excess amount of tzimtzum, which is what happens during Galus, then things become disaligned. Even the fact that it appears to us that good people suffer, that's a disalignment. Because what should have been is that a tzaddik, the troif hanirav haniglo, should have a gavaldik life. That's what it should be. That's in Geula. Galus means that this world is not reflecting the emes. So it could be, not it could be. The Rebbe holds that when the Torah is speaking about the movements of the heavenly bodies, speaking about the ruchnis, the heavenly bodies. If Begashmi is now, at this time, The sun is going quicker, the sun is going slower. Who cares? That's because it's disaligned. So maybe when Shmuel Bar Nachmani, he was living in a very ruchnistic world. Over there, the sun and the moon goes in one type of movement. He needed to know, we needed to come down from his madrega to see what's happening in Eilam Hazeh to decide whether you need an Ibur Shana. And by the way, another detail, that one of the secondary reasons to be Ma'aber Shana is not even about the movements of the sun and the moon. It's not even about the spring and Pesach and being in the equinox. That's the main reason. Many times it can be that the bridges were broken from winter. There was too much snow. People cannot do Aliyas L'Regel. There isn't enough Shepselach yet ready for Korban Pesach. These are very down-to-earth reasons. You have to go down from your lofty tower to find out was tutzich mit ha'olam, maybe another expression, but he didn't leave Israel. Because what happened was he went to a location that was not his normal place. And Hava Makabel Gabi Rabbi Yaakov Go Roisa, Hava Makabel Gabi. Everything is worded we have to use. He was received in the home of Rabbi Yaakov. Now, what happens when Tzaddik Bala'ir? We had in brachas, right? That we want to learn, we want to get shimush. How do you get shimush? You have to observe the behavior of a tzaddik. We learned about Amoraim that went into the bathroom, hiding to see how a Tana, how an Amoira goes to the bathroom. We had the Talmidim that went under the bed of the teacher to see how they are with their wives. Shimush, to find out. You have to get used.
It was Rav Kahana.
And Danny remembers not the name.
Under the bed of Rav.
That's right? Under the bed of Rav. So what happened there was something similar. That Vahava Rav Ze'era was metamer beinei kupaya. Rav Ze'era here amongst baskets. In other words, he found out where is Rav Shmuel sleeping. So he wanted to sleep Vigate Min Shlafa. And what happened? So Mishmana, he heard, Hey Chavikari Shema. He heard him reading the Shema. And what did he hear? And the way the Charedim says, the first time he read the Shema, this was also following the opinion that Tfilas Be'emtza Tik might have was Shema Shmona Esrei, but you didn't fulfill the mitzvah of Shema. When he went to go to sleep, the first Shema was the Birchais Krishma, what we daven might have, the two brachas before and the two brachas after. But he didn't fall asleep. So not only did he not interrupt it by saying other words, he repeated the Shema, and he repeated the Shema. He wanted to make sure that he falls asleep during the saying of the Shema. I think if we would be saying the Shema, we wouldn't fall asleep. Keep ourselves awake. It's this concept of Ein Omer Devarim Achar Emes V'Yatziv. Matama already, we already learned it means not what's the reason, but what's the source. Right, Rav Tachlifa was the father-in-law of Rav Acha. They both said the shame Rabbi Shmuel Bar Nachman that when it says in Tehillim, Rigzu v'al techto, tremble and don't sin. Imru b'levavchem, saying in your hearts, al mishkaftem, on your beds. V'doimu, you know what doimu means? Silent. Be silent forever. That's what it means. That tremble and don't sin. That's always. Imru b'levavchem, that's an allusion to when you say the al levavecha, when you say the Shema al mishkaftem on your beds, when you say the Shema at night, you know what you should do? After the Shema, silence afterwards. Come on. Now the Gemara says, Milsa, that Rabbi Shua ben Levi pligay. But Rabbi Shua ben Levi disagrees. Because Rabbi Shua ben Levi, it was Karei Mizmoidim Basrei. He would receive Tehillim. And by the way, that must be the earlier sources for our Krishma Shalamita. We say Yoshe, we say Ser Elyoin. No, we have certain Kapitach Tehillim that are Sugulas also Mepnei Amazikim. But the fact that he said even Tehillim, very much like the Talmidim of Rabbi Yasa, that's because they don't subscribe that Ein Omer Devarim. Says the Gemara, on Rabbi Shua ben Levi, how can he say Mizmoidim Bat Tehillim? So right away the Gemara says, hold on a second. There's two emes v'yatzivs, the Shachris and Maidiv. Don't confuse one with the other. So Pasad law, huh? You came a little bit late. All right, no one knows who that is. Pasad law. So no, Rabbi Shmuel right away says that emes v'yatzivs Shachris and a Chanami. There, the Soymech Gula Tefillah. We don't say anything after Emes V'Yatziv. You know what we do say Shemona Esrei. Here we're speaking about going to sleep at night. Let's start the next sugya. This is all behemshach to saying Shemona Esrei. Now we're talking about Shachris right after Emes V'Yatziv. So says the Gemara that the Mar, we already had this a few times, add the letter Aleph. Aleph is normally omitted in the Yerushalmi. In the Bible it would be the Amar, right? Not master. That the Mar, Rab Zeira, Shem Rabbi Bari Yimriya, Rab Zeira, B'Shem says that Shalosh Tichifois Hein. There are three that require immediate one after the other. Takev L'Smicha Shchita. Not that all of the Karbanos had Smicha, but whenever we had Smicha done by a Karban, it needed to be done right immediately prior to the Shchita. The other Takev is Takev L'Natilas Yadayim B'Racha. In other words, that when it comes to the Hamoitzi, and this is a little bit tricky. Okay, we're not talking about the bracha of Al Natilas Yadayim. We're speaking about the bracha of Hamoitzi. You wash your hands until Yadayim. You have 50 guests on the table. What do? Go struggle with that. In other words, the concept is not that since I won't be mafsik b'dibur and therefore I won't have esach hadas, I can wait a half an hour to make the birchas hamoitzi. It should be done immediately. And take a l'geula tefillah. You know what, Chaver? We'll stop over here, and then God willing, we'll continue by diving into all of the three takeives.
Rabbi,
yes.
Can you just recap the opinions that we learned today on this whole Krishma? Do you say it right at the end? Did you say it? And then are you allowed to say afterwards? I'm a little. Okay,
it's very simple. So that was the Charei. Our Gemara is following the opinions that we learned in Bavli. It's called Tfilos Be'emtza Tiknon. Tfilos Be'emtza Tiknon means that we say Shema in the morning, we say Shema at night, and all of the Tfilos, all of the Shemona Esreis are said in between. Now by Shachris, yeah, of course, you say Shema and then Shemona Esrei. Mincha is Mincha. In order for all of the Shemona Esreis to be in middle of both Shema recitations, it can only fit if the Shema at night is said dafka after Shemona Esrei. And the way they would daven ma'ariv then is, first of all, they would not be makbet to daven ma'ariv by tzeis. They would daven mincha ma'ariv. They didn't care how earlier they daven ma'ariv. And we're speaking about after plaga mincha. The way most Shruma people do today in most shuls, mincha ma'ariv, even if it's before the zman of davening ma'ariv. Nowadays we daven mamash ma'ariv. Then they only said Shema, Shemona Esrei, ma'ariv, and they owed the mitzvah of saying the Shema. Another detail, when they owed the mitzvah of saying Shema, they didn't stam say Shema. They needed to say Shema with all of the brachas. That was done before they went to sleep in their homes. Now the question is, how important is it that after you read that Shema with the Emes V'Yatziv Hashkivenu, they would end? I mean, our nusach, the Ashkenazim have another long brach. Whatever the nusach of today's ma'ariv is, without the Shemona Esrei, they would daven Baruch Atah Hashem L'Kemal L'Chayim Hashem B'Dvarim Ha'arav Rav Ava Soilam Ava Rabbi Emes V'Emuna Emes V'Yatziv. They said Agol Hashkivenu. That would be what they said at night. Now what? Either then fall asleep, and if you want to be a chassid, if you can't fall asleep, keep on repeating the Shema until you fall asleep. Or, okay, you did it. Do that before Chatzois, Rabbi Yasso, and then go about your stuff. He was speaking about Talmidei Chachamim, they would learn Torah. Non-Talmidei Chachamim, they would go shmooze.
That's Rabbi Yasso versus Rav Huna.
Rabbi Yasso versus Rav Huna. That's it. That's what we learned.
And then what is Shmuel Bar Nachmani? What's his?
Shmuel Bar Nachmani, we proved, holds like Rav Huna. That Ein Oimed Devarim Achaz, because he, Mamish, not only did he not say anything, he kept on repeating the Shema. The first Shema was with the brachas. We said the first Shema was with the brachas. And then he couldn't fall asleep. He would say Shema again. His wife was trying to talk to him. He was saying the Shema.
By the way, is this Rav Huna the same Rav Huna from Bavli, or is it different?
Someone should make a research on that. I'm also curious.
And you're not saying God, and you're not saying God's name in vain if you keep repeating Shema?
No, because you're saying Psukim in the Torah, you can say as many times as you want. When you say a full pasuk in Tanakh, you can say it the way it's written with God's name.
Thank you.
Okay, today